get started. We are at the end, near the end of the module 6. Okay, we need to go through one more example, discuss a little bit more, and we would end module 6 before we can move on to module 7. Right. So let me show you the example that we try to finish right now. That's module 6 and slide 42. So a process works 2 8-hour shifts a day. So let's call this process as a car factory. The car factory is open for 2 8-hour shifts a day, and the daily demand is 960 cars. Right. So a car has to go through 6 processing steps. As an example, we try to simplify our calculation, right? By having only 6 steps. And then at each step, a worker typically takes 1 minute to process the car through. So what is the takt time? We did that last time, right? In part B, what is the target manpower? In part C, if the demand decreases to 480 units per day or cars per day, what would be the staffing decision? Right? So we learn more a little bit about the staffing decision that a manager would need to take. So let me go to the whiteboard. Okay, so we are still at 106. About lean operation. And the big topic that we have right now is called the Toyota production system. Or TPS, right? So we are looking at the example of the car factory. This module 6, slide 42. All right, so the factory is open for 2 8-hour shifts a day, and the demand rate is 960 cars a day. Right. Besides that, now we have more information about how the process looks like. So our process has 6 steps or 6 stations, right? So if we draw it, it's going to look something like this. So a car will go in this way, not in the form of a car yet, right? And then a car will go out that way when it is completed. So our process has 6 steps or 6 stations, okay? So the first station is right here, and then the second, the third, the fourth, fifth, and 6 stations for the cars to go through. So in this case, they say that the labor content is 1 minute at each of the step, right? So it means that in the step number 1, one worker will take about 1 minute to work or of labor to work on that car. And then the car moves up to the next station, right? So we call that as a labor content. So we know that the labor content at each station is 1 minute. Right. But that also means that if you look at a car, then a car will need a total of 6 minutes of labor. Right. So later on, we're going to calculate the labor content of the whole car, not at each of the station here. Then it's going to be 6 minutes in total. Right. So that's a labor content. Okay. So now next, the question number one is we need to find the takt time, right? This is what we did last time. So I just briefly review that for you. So the takt time is available time divided by the demand rate. So the available time is, remember, we talk about 2 8-hour shifts. So we just multiply to 8 hours with 2. Then we know how many hours it is open per day, right? The demand rate is 960 cars per day. So let's move on. The days will be canceled down, right? And then we only have 16 hours divided by 960 cars. But I would like to convert it to the minutes. So we have 960 minutes instead of the hours, right? Divided by 960 cars. And again, the days already canceled out. So eventually, our takt time is 1 minute per car. So again, what is a takt time? The takt time is not the actual pace of production. The takt time is a target pace of production, right? Because we want to produce 960 cars a day. Then we want the process to be at 1 minute per car. In other words, we want the process to coin out a new car every 1 minute, right? So the takt time right here tells us the target pace of production. Not the actual. The actual can be different from the target. For example, the actual pace of production or the actual cycle time is 1.5 minutes, right? And 1.5 minutes too slow for 1 minute target. So in that case, we have to reconfigure our process, hiring more workers, renting more equipment, so that from 1.5 minutes per car, we can go down to 1.4, to 1.3, 1.2, 1.1, and then hit exactly 1.0. Right? And from the lean perspective, that's good. We don't want to overproduce. We don't want to underproduce. We just want to produce exactly how much that we can sell every day. All right, so that's a takt time. That tells us how fast the process should go, right, to meet up exactly with the demand. All right, so now in part B is a little bit new for us. We will need to calculate how many workers that we need to have on the assembly line. So in part 2, or in part B, we need to calculate the target manpower, right? So the target manpower is labor content of a car divided by the takt time. Right. Let's calculate it, and then we're going to interpret the results to understand more about these concepts. So the labor content is what? At each station is going to take 1 minute of labor. So the labor content of a car is a sum of those, right? So that's the first station, the second station, the third station, fourth one, fifth, and then sixth. So in total, we have to spend 6 minutes of labor or work on each car. So we call that as a labor content of the car. So minutes per car, right? And the takt time, it is 1 minute per car, calculated earlier, right? So eventually, the target manpower in this case is going to be 6. So it means that we need 6 workers on the assembly line so that we can meet up with a demand of 960 cars per day. Right, so we would need 6 workers. And because there are 6 stations, right, then we would have 1 worker at each station. Right, so if you go back to the process diagram here, we have 6 stations, right? And at each station takes 1 minute for the worker to finish the job. So we have 1 worker here, another worker here, another worker here, another worker here, another worker here. Each one of them will have to work for about 1 minute on each car, right? So in total, their work together is 6 minutes per car. So that's a labor content. And the takt time is what? The takt time is 1 minute per car, right? So let's assume that we can meet up with that target pace of production. We can crank out a car every 1 minute. Then we take the labor content divided by that cycle time, right? Then we will know how many workers that we should have. So 1 worker here, 1 worker here, 1 worker here, 1 worker here. Each one of them works for 1 minute per car. And the cycle time will be 1 minute per car, right? So that's the target manpower. In C, we have the following. Now, for some reason, the new demand is less than before. It's only 480 cars per day, right? Earlier, we have 960 cars a day. So definitely this demand is smaller than before. So with the new demand rate like this, how many workers that we should have on the assembly line? Then first of all, it means that we need to calculate the target manpower, right? But in the target manpower, we would need to calculate the takt time first. So now we have to revise our takt time, or the new takt time equals we will take the available time again, and then divide that by the new demand rate. Right. The available time is the same thing as before. The factory is open for 2-hour shifts. So in the numerator, we would have 960 minutes available time per day. And divided by the new demand rate of 480 cars per day. All right. So the new results, or the new takt time, is going to be 2 minutes per car. All right, so remember, earlier it is only 1 minute. Now, because the demand is half, then we don't want to overproduce, right? That's why we only target at a much slower pace than before. Half the pace of what we have earlier, right? Earlier is 1 minute per car, but now it is 2 minutes per car. So technically speaking, in the new situation, we want it to be half as fast as what we have earlier. Right, 2 minutes is half as fast as 1 minute per car. So after we got the new takt time, now we can revise our target manpower. So the new target manpower would be, right? So we take the label content, that hasn't changed. But now we can divide that by the new takt time. So the label content is still 6 minutes per car. Divide that by the new takt time of 2 minutes per car. Right? Then the answer of this ratio is going to be 3. All the units will be canceled out. So again, that means the following. We will need three workers. Earlier we need 6 workers, but now we only need 3 workers. But remember, 3 workers, and we have 6 stations, right? 6 steps. So in this case, 1 worker would be in charge of 2 stations. Right? We have half the number of workers that we have earlier, so now a worker would have to do more. So all of these is just the following. We go back here. So in this case, right, we only have 3 workers. So a car will come in. The first worker will do the first activity, the first step, right? And then the car move here, and the same workers will work on that steps. So it takes 2 minutes for the car to finish with 1 worker, right? So after the first 2 minutes, the car will be here. The second worker will work on it. And then another minute goes by, the same worker will work on it, put in different parts, for example, right? So it's also take 2 minutes for the car to go through that worker. And then the car moves up to the third worker. So the third worker will take 1 minute for that part. And then they will do another minute for another part, right? So in total, it takes 2 minutes for a car to go through that worker. So that's why the cycle time here would be 2 minutes per car, right? Not 1 minute per car like before. So so 1 worker will be in charge of 2 activities. Each one of them takes 1 minute, right? So all of these are kind of consistent with each other and with our calculation. We only have 3 workers rather than 6, right? Because we have much less demand than before. So in a sense, what we learn here is the following. We do staffing according to demand. We talk about this in module 4, right? But now we actually see the calculation. So this is staffing according to demand. Right. So if demand goes down, we would not need too many workers. If demand goes up, then we would need to have more workers, right? In real life, how can you change your workforce easily like that, right? Then here's the thing. you should have a workforce mixed of full-timers and part-timers. The full-timers work every day. The part-timers only work if you call them in, right? They already have some job. They want to make some extra incomes by working a little bit more for you, right? So sometimes you call them in, sometimes you don't call them in. When the demand goes up, you would call them in, right? Because you need more workers to work on the cars. Is everybody good with the example? I hope it is okay, right? All right, so with this example, we are done with that calculation of the target manpower and the tech time, right? Thank you, Falan, for your feedback. Okay, so here's the another thing that I want to talk about, the toilet production system. One more thing, and then we wrap this up and we move on to the next module. So a toilet production system, they have the so-called stop the line concept. Right. What does that mean, stop the line at Toyota? They have the so-called end on cord. So if you pull that cord, the whole assembly line will be shut down. Right? Everything is stopped if you pull that cord. Remember, on the assembly line, there might be hundreds of other workers or thousands of other workers, right? So you pull the cord, you stop the work of many other people, of many workers, right? Let me ask you, if you are in the factory, do you have the courage to pull the cord or not? The end-on cord is normally for you to pull if you see a defect in the car that is right in front of you, okay? So if you see a defect, would you pull the cord or not? You're gonna stop the work of thousands of, hundreds or thousands of other workers, right? Would you pull it? Okay. Yeah, some of you are courageous enough to pull it. That's good. So at Toyota, they have to train the workers to develop a culture where the workers see the benefit of pulling the cords, right? So if they see a defect in one car, it doesn't only mean that we have a single defect, right? In mass production of cars, a lot of steps and parts are repeated many times. So we see one defect over there. Maybe that defect happens to other cars right now, right? And if we do not pull the cord, then we're gonna have a lot of defects later on. We might find out the defects before we ship out to the customer. But then at that time, we have a pile of cars with defects in it, right? It's not good. So whenever we see a defect, maybe it is best for the company to just pull the cord, right? So you need they will need to train the workers so that the workers will have that culture of braveness, of being aware of the benefit of pulling the cord, right? So that they will have the courage to pull the cord. Do you see the importance of this? If we don't pull the cord, the defects will not be found in other cars, and then later on we have to fix a lot of things, right? So here we talk about the Toyota production system, but we can extend it to many things that we see in real life. For example, in the commercial aviation industry, if there's a problem in the engine of one airplane, normally they will ground the whole fleet, right? Hundreds of other airplanes will have to be grounded because they will need to check what is going on with that defects. Is that the same defects in other airplanes or not? Right? They will check it, inspect everything related before they can let the airplanes fly right to the sky again. Okay, or in the cockpit of an airplane, there's a pilot and a co-pilot, right? The pilot sounds like the boss. The co-pilot sounds like the second man in the cockpit, right? So you know what, the airlines, they have to train the workers so that the pilot and the co-pilot should be treated equal. So that if the pilot does something wrong, then the co-pilot can jump in and fix the error. Otherwise, it's not good at all, right? So in real life or in your work in the future or right now, sometimes we have to stop the line because otherwise bad things might happen, right? And that's why there's sometimes companies, they have the so-called whistleblower protection. If somebody sees something bad, see other managers or something doing bad things, right? Then you might whistleblow with the board or something like that, so that they can correct the problem. Otherwise, it will not good for the company if bad things happen, right? So they even put some kind of policy or some kind of institutions where the whistleblowers will be protected, right? So in a sense, you provide, you nurture the courage in the workers, right? So that whenever they see something bad, they will pull the cord either physically at the car factory or they report the problems, right? So that the system can correct the problem. So stop the line is a very important feature of a modern car factory, but we also learn that and apply that to other things, right? All right, so with that, I would like to close our module 6. There are more topics in the toilet production system. I only ask you to read all of the conceptual things. The calculation, we only limit ourselves to what we have here in the class notes, okay? So reading the concepts is not that difficult, right? I encourage everybody to review what you already read on Connect about lean operations, about the toilet production system. You might find something useful for your work and also for your life too, right? Every day we try to find out the waste and then try to eliminate the waste so that we have more time, we have more money to do something else more valuable for us, right? So that's the spirit of the module 6. It's about fighting the waste and then eliminate the waste. And that can be applied everywhere, okay? Not just in a company. It can be in our life, in your studies, something like that. So with that, I would like to wrap up module 6. And today we move on to module 7 right away. So let me share with you the slide module 7.
Professor,
Yes.
can I ask a question about the problems that we just discussed?
Okay, please feel free.
So for the first one, we need 6 workers, but
Yes.
we have 2 shifts per day. So
Yeah.
each shift is 8 hours. So the 6 workers is for each shift or for the 2 shifts.
So on average, it means that for each shift we have 6 workers. And then at the end of the first shift, those 6 workers will go home and the next 6 workers will replace them.
So that means we need to have 12 workers instead of 6 workers.
12 different workers, but at each point in time, we only need 6 workers.
Oh,
Right.
okay. Okay. Yeah, got it now. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for the question. Okay, so good. Let's move on to module 7 about project management, right? So project management is an important part of operation. This is drawn from from chapter 19 in our textbook. But here and there, normally I would bring something from outside the book, right? So that we can learn more. This is an outline of the module 7, but there are something that we will not cover. For example, the port topic right here, it is not required, and we don't have time, so I will not cover the port. Instead, we mainly focusing on the critical path method, right? That's a heart of the whole module 7. So what is a critical path method? It is a method for us to focus on the schedule of the project to see where we should schedule this activity, where should we schedule the next activity, things like that, right? So that's the main content of this module 7. So what is a project? I have the short definition here, and I also have the long definition here. A temporary and one-time operation, right? As a short definition, a project is a temporary and one-time operation, like a wedding party, right? It is one time, or a new product development, like development of a new COVID vaccine. So that's a project, right? But to be more effective, to understand more deeply, right? We would understand a project as a temporary and often customized initiative, right? A lot of things are customized. So definitely a production car is not a project. A production car, like a car that you drive every day, right? They produce thousands and thousands of them. Of course, each car is kind of different in the paint or the trim, the options inside the cars. But then in overall, right, thousands of cars are kind of similar. So not much customization or differentiation among the cars, right? So we do not call the production cars as a projects. They are just production cars, which means that they produce a lot of those. Okay, so a project will be different from a car because it is temporary, which means that only one time, and then with a lot of customization, right? That consists of many smaller tasks and activity that must be coordinated and completed to finish the entire initiative on time and within budget. Right. So here, one crucial thing that we see here is later on we would break down a project into smaller tasks and activities. And when a project is composed of tasks and activities, then there will be a need to coordinate those activities, right? So that we have the correct sequence to go through. And at the end, we try to achieve the whole project on time and within budget, right? So those are the important things that we need to consider when we manage our project. So some companies, they do projects all the time, and they are called a project business. For example, a market research firms, right? One customer might ask them to do research on the clothes. Another customer will ask them to do research on the earbuds, with which we listen to the musics, right? Or another customer asks them to do research on the cell phone market, things like that, so that they can make the better generation of cell phones, right? So they do projects all the time. Each project is different with a lot of customization in it. or construction companies, right? They move from one house to the next house. The homeowners will ask them to do different things in the house, right? A lot of customization over there, and only it is one off. So they do projects all the time, and that's why they are called the project businesses or event organization firms, right? They do wedding party, they do birthday parties, retirement parties, things like that. Projects all the time. Or we are in Southern California, right? Some of you might work for a movie or film studios later on. Who knows, right? Because you are in Southern California, there's some chance there. Then they do movies around the year. A big studio, they might do 30 movies in a year, or even more than that, right? So they are called a project business. Okay, so I would like to go back to the whiteboard and discuss some key things here with you as an overview about project management. By the way, later on, I will refer you to this slide number 8, right? What are the main activities that a manager would have to do in project management? For example, defining the project, planning the project, and controlling the project, right? So those are the key activities that a project managers will have to do. All right, so now let me go back to the whiteboard. And I would like to organize an overview of project management. So we officially move on to module 7 about project management. So first of all, we have to understand what a project is, right? So normally it is a one-off initiative, one-time or one-off initiative that requires smaller tasks and activities. So with multiple tasks or activities, right? That need coordination. So that the whole thing can be completed on time and within our budget. Right. So budget is how much we want to spend. The plan total sum of money that we would have to spend on the project, right? So there are some important keywords here. One of tasks and activities or activities. And then we have to have the coordination. And then at the end, the goal is we finish the whole thing, okay, on time and within our budget. We don't want to overrun the cost and time, right? Because sometimes with the deadline, if we coin out the products before the holiday shopping season, then you're gonna be much more successful rather than we will coin it out later on, right? Or within budget. Companies, they try to control the cost by allotting this much of money for this project, another sum of money for another project. Otherwise, people might overrun the cost, and then that will cut into the profit margins of the company. Right. Let me go back to the task, activities, and coordination. So to effectively manage a project, we should not understand the project as one big thing. We should break the project down into the components, right? And then we can manage the components. But then when we break it down into the components, then we have to worry about the sequencing or the coordination among different components of the project. So for us to understand that, I would like to ask the whole class about the following. So everybody knows that we got a new building on our campus called the SSB, right? The Student Services Building or Successes Building. So it is called SSB. Some of you might have not looked at that with your own eyes yet, right? Because you have never been on campus yet. So it's a space shaped-like building like this, and it has different floors, right? So here's a question for all of you. Right before we can build the second floor, what do we have to do? Please feel free to share your answer in the chat window. Right before you build the second floor, what do we have to do? Okay, let's see, you got a question. Let's see, okay, Christopher. Okay, Michael, you're very deep in the technology, in the technicality of it, and following the foundation. Okay, good. So it's not a tricky question. I asked you that so that everybody is more conscious about the main content of this module 7. Okay, the main content of this module 7 is we need to break down the project into different components, right? That building as a project, to complete that building, we should break it out into different floors. So right before we build the second floor, you know what? You have to build the first floor, right? Otherwise, it's really hard to build the second floor. Technically that can be done, but then possibly later on you have to. It's harder for you to go back and build the first floor. Not to mention you have to redo something to complete the first floor, right? So in this case, I take that simple question for you because so now I hope that we have the mindset as a following. We will need to break any project down into components, and then we pay attention to the sequencing of the components, right? Sometimes something has to go first before we can do the next step to the next component. All right, so right before we build the second floor, we have to build the first floor. So that's a technically logical sequence that we can do so that we can save time, money, and it is safer to do it that way, right? So that's the coordination right there. That's why here, when we talk about tasks and activities, then at the end, we need to have the coordination among different things. To be a little bit more kind of, or a little bit closer to what we normally see in real life, right? Think about your house. Before in construction of a house, before they put the drywall on the frames, right? Then they have to do a lot of things inside the wall first, like the water line, the gas line, the power line, all of the drainage, or the ventilators, or all of the vents, things like that. A lot of things need to be done inside the wall first before they plug it up with the drywall, right? Otherwise, if we put the drywall quite early on, then later on you have to rip it out to do electricity, to do water, things like that, right? It's not good at all. It costs money. It takes more time. It takes more effort. Right? So that's why in project management, one of the key things is we have to sequence the activities correctly, right? to save time, money, and effort. Not to mention that is a correct way, technical way to do it, things like that, right? Or earlier, I asked you about the SSB building, right? So right before the second floor is the first floor. Then right before the first floor is a foundation, the base and the foundation, in which you have the water supply, power supply, gas supply, or the drainage, or the technical infrastructure for the whole building, right? So things are sequenced in that order so that we can effectively build up other layers of the building. Okay, so that's the concept of a project. Now let's move on to the concept of project management. In other words, what do we need to do in project management? Right, another big topic of this module study. So project management, or PM, right? We know that we should break down the project into different activities. And that means that we will need to coordinate them, right? So we will need to do it systematically. So this requires systematic management. To do that, then the project manager would need to do the following main activities. PM, okay? This, you can see more details in module 7, slide number 8. So first of all, we have to define the project, right? Defining a project. First of all, we have to define the scope, right? What is the scope? For example, do we want it to be 3-bedroom house, or do we want it to be like 5-bedroom house? Of course, the 5-bedroom house has a bigger scope than the 3-bedroom house, right? Not only that, but also the quality, how much, how luxurious you want the house to be. That's another that is another dimension of the scope. Okay, so that's defining the scope. We define what we want, right? What the final outcome that we want to achieve. All right. So the second thing about defining here is about time. How much time do we want to finish the project, or how much time do we have to finish the project? And then about budget, how much does it cost? How much we are allowed to spend on the project, right? And then in defining, we also have the, okay, so earlier we already talked about the activities and tasks, right? So in the defining phase, we also have to think about the workdown structure. Right. So workdown structure means that we break the whole project down into different components, so that later on we can effectively manage the sequence among the activities. All right. So defining, right, and then the next one is planning. So now we are quite sure we have a better idea or clearer idea of what we want and what we have in terms of money and time. Now we would plan out our actual production. To do that, then you have to pay attention to the dependency, right, among the different activities. For example, to build the second floor, we have to build the first floor. Before we build the first floor, we have to do the basement with a lot of infrastructure in it. And before that, we have to do the foundation for the whole thing, right? So we are aware of the components, and then we see the dependency among the components, right? So in our class, we're going to learn about the project network to understand more about the dependency, right? To keep track of the dependency, or we can use a Gantt chart to kind of see the dependency among the activities, right? Okay, so that's planning. Oh, by the way, the key thing out of planning is at the end we should have the schedule of the project, right? So scheduling is one key thing that we have in planning, and that's our focus in our class. So the third activity is controlling. So it means that we are in the actual production process, right? Now, to follow the schedule that we plan early on, right? We need to put out the milestones, right? So milestones are like the checkpoints that we have in our class. By that day, we should have finished something, we should achieve something, so that we stay current with the schedule. And then at the end, we finish the whole thing on time, right? So we put out the milestones, and then we review to see if we meet the milestones or not, right? And if we are behind the milestones, then we should take some better action. Hiring more workers, renting more equipment, right? Or renting better equipment, so that we can speed up the process and stay current with the milestones. So that's controlling. And so those are normally the three popular main activities that people talk about in project management, right? But if you are is a project company, they do projects at the time all the time, then the fourth activity here should be an important thing. So closing a project, right? Defining, planning, controlling, and closing a project. What do we do in closing? For example, we reassign the resources. Like workers, like equipment, the crane needs to be moved to the next site, things like that, right? Or these workers will need to work on another job site. So that's the reassignment of resources. But there is one more thing. It is about reflection. Reflection means that we think back about what we did in this project. What are the good things that we did? What are the bad things that we did? So we're gonna replicate the good things, and we try to avoid the bad things, right? So that's reflection. 2 weeks ago, there was a accident in the movie involving Alec Baldwin, right? So that problem actually happened a long time ago with not exactly like that, but something like that happened with Brandon Lee. Brandon Lee is a son of Bruce Lee. He died because of the gun accident during movie production, right? So with reflection, we should avoid those kind of things, right? the later project should learn from the previous project, so that we do not have the same problem again. And then obviously in the recent accident, the movie crew made the mistake that long time ago somebody also made that mistake. So that's why last week the Rock is Dwayne Johnson, right? Announced that he would not use real firearms in movie production in the future, right? Because he try to do away with all that kind of risk and danger. All right. All right. So those are the main activities that as a project manager you will need to do, right? Defining, planning, controlling, and if you do projects again and again, you should do the closing seriously. Right, we need to learn from the good lessons, and we also learn from the bad lessons. Okay, so next I would like to move on to another conceptual discussion about project management, and then after that we would talk about a specific example. All right, so next we talk about the project triangle. Right. The project triangle is literally a triangle like the following. There are three vertices. Then one vertex is for the scope of the project, right? The project, when we talk about a project, we talk about the scope because it tells us the desirable outcomes at the end, right? What do we want to achieve at the end? Is that a bigger house with these kind of furniture, or sorry, with these amenities, with these features, things like that, right? So that's the scope. But then as a manager, you also have to worry about another important aspect of the project, which is the budget. Right? It's about cost and available money. And then the third important, I should not say the third. It sounds like is less than important than the previous one, right? Another important aspect of the project here is the time, right? Because a lot of the time we have to meet the deadlines. So you know what? In our class, the time is our focus. So that will help us to do scheduling, right? The budget, we do not talk about money much here because we do not have the concrete context or things like that. And the scope, of course, we take that into account. But normally the scope is given by the example or by the homework questions, right? So we do not really calculate anything about the scope. We just take it as is. And then we break it out into different components, and then we calculate. So here is a calculation, right? We calculate so that we can schedule those activities or components in the correct way. Okay, so when we draw this project triangle, then here's a notion, okay? There's a lot of trade-offs among the three things, the three main aspects that we lay out here. In terms of the scope, we always want to have more, to have better things to achieve more at the end of the project, right? So we want more. But in terms of the budget, we want to save money. We want less over there. And in terms of time, we also want less time. We want to finish the project as soon as we can, right? So, but those three goals are kind of in conflict with each other. For example, if we want to have a bigger house, then we have to spend more, right? That's a conflict with the budget goals. And then if we want to have a bigger house, then we have to finish that longer. So that's also another conflict for that, right? Between the budget and time, it is also the conflict. So we call that as a trade-offs or the conflict. If we want this one, then we have to sacrifice or compromise another thing, right? Among the three main aspects, three big aspects of any project. So that's a project triangle. But there's one more thing here. Beside the trade-offs among these three kind of big things, a manager would have to deal with the real conflicts. Okay, different department would want more money, right? We have a limited sum of money, and now different people will fight each other for more money for the departments so that they can do more. Or different departments will compete for the machine. They need that machine to complete their job, but then other department also needs that, so they will have to also have that conflict too, right? So actually, as a project manager, you would have to deal with those kind of conflicts too. You have to have the interpersonal skills so that you can resolve the conflicts in some way. Not to mention the technical consideration that you should have, right, to manage the conflicts. So as a sum up, we just say here that a project manager would have to manage. Normally we think that a manager will manage the production, manage the construction, right? But beside those technical things, he or she also would have to manage the conflicts among different people, among different departments, right? Among different goals in a project. Okay, so it sounds like a little bit of an overview and conceptual discussion. So to really learn the key concept of this module, I would like to show you the example. But let me show you the example here. I think on slide 40, right? Let me share that with you. So I take this example from another book. It doesn't matter because through this example, we can also learn the same concept and methods that we are supposed to learn in this module 7. Mary is planning her wedding and develops the following preliminary information. So this is a table where it contains the information of this project. The first column tells us a work breakdown structure, right? The wedding project can be broken down into selecting the wedding date, selecting the location, and then come up with a guest list and send out the invitation cards, right? And then in D, we need to have an entertainment company to come over to do the fun things for the party. In E, we need to choose a catering company where they will provide the food, right? Okay, and at the end, we have the wedding day itself. That's a party. So in the second column, we have the predecessor, right? The predecessor is like the question that I asked you earlier. Before we build the second floor, we have to build the first floor. So the first floor is a predecessor of the second floor, the requirement before the second floor, right? Or in our daily college language, we call that as a prerequisite. So A and B do not have any predecessors. It means that the bride-to-be and the groom-to-be can select the date and the location right away without any constraints, right? But to send out the invitation cards in activity C, you will need to have the date and the location printed on the cards, right? So that the guests can come and can work those in their schedule. In D, we need to have the entertainment, right? Then to choose an entertainment company, we have to have the date, right? The band needs to know when they when the wedding day is, if they are available on that day, right? Something like that, so that they can sign the contract with you. And in part E, the catering companies would need to know the date to work in their schedule, and then they need to know how many guests there would be, right? So that they plan out the cooking for that party. And the wedding day is only happy and joyful if we have good entertainment and catering. So those are the requirements before the wedding day. I hope you see, right? The logic here is we're going to break down the project into the components, and then we pay attention on the dependency among the components, right? And in other words, we have to coordinate among the different tasks that we have here. In the third column, we're going to have the time to finish each of the activities, right? 1 week for A, 4 for B, C takes 3 weeks, entertainment takes 4 weeks, catering takes 3 weeks. The wedding day is only 1 day, so we do that as 0 weeks, right? Some celebrities, they are rich. They can do the whole party as 1 week long, even more than that, right? In that case, we will have 1 week for the wedding party. But for the regular people like us, we only do that as 1 day, 1 out of 7 days, right? So that's why we call that as 0 weeks. So we have short on time. Let me go back to the whiteboard right away and do something important here. And then next week we will continue. Okay. So at this point we talk about the heart of the module 7, which is the critical path method. Or CPM. CPM is for us to do scheduling later on, or that will help us to do scheduling. All right. Before we go to the example, we should make the following some key assumptions. The first key assumption is the activity times estimates are correct and fixed. So if a contractor tells you that I estimate that room will be done in a week, then that 1 week estimate should be correct and will not change. Right. So that's the first key assumption that we have here. The second key assumption is the dependency that we talked about earlier, right, is only one way. Right. So there can be two-way dependency, but then that will complicate our analysis. So we try to avoid that complication by having only one-way dependency. And the example that we have here is the wedding example. That's module 7 and slide 40. Right. Let me make sure. Okay. So again, like in the example or in the homework questions, I would give you the table. So in the first column, we're going to have the activities. or the ID, right? It just saying that we break the project down into different activities, and we call them with these names or that name or ABCs, right? The second, so we have A, B, C, D, E, F in this case. The second column is for the IP. That stands for immediate predecessor, right? The first floor is an immediate predecessor of the second floor. So that's the second column. And the third column is the normal time, right? To complete each of the activities. So that's the information that we have. You know what, because we're short on time, I leave that blank. I will fill it in later. It's already on slide 40 already, right? So you're gonna have that. So here's the first thing that we do in this example. I would like to start this early so that you can start that question 25 early. So we need to draw the activity on node project network. Right, so later on we would call that as a AON network for short. AON stands for activity on node. So we would start from, so we draw a map, okay? We draw a picture. We have activity A over there, we have activity B over here. And then to send out the invitation cards, we need to know the date and the location, right? So those two requirements are presented by these two arrows. And before we choose a catering company, we need to know the date. So we have the arrow going from the date to catering, to the entertainment company, right? And then the E is catering. So to do catering, we need to know the date. That's one arrow. We also need to know how many guests there would be. That's the another arrow, right? Going to E from C. And finally, we have the wedding day. So we have one arrow going from entertainment, another arrow going from food, right? And to be complete in this picture, we should have the dates, I mean the number of weeks it takes to finish each of the activities. So A is 1 week, B is 4 weeks, C is 3, D is 4, E is 3, and F is 0. So in this map, right, we see the following. We will see the work breakdown structure. Second, we see the dependency. Third, we see the completion times or activity times. And fourth, we will see all of the pathways through the projects, right? You already read this earlier on Connect. So in this project, we see different pathways going through it. So next week, we will continue this example, and we will do much more. So I would like to thank you all for joining me. Have a great weekend. By the way, it's tomorrow because of the Veterans Day. I will not hold my office hours, but I still have my office hours on Friday, right? So as usual. So have a great rest of your day. Thank you, and I will have to see you back next Monday. Okay, so I hope everybody is doing good.